What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you. I am hanging out in the great state of Missouri right now in St. Louis. I'm on a business trip, but I will be headed back to the great state of Michigan tomorrow. Um, yeah, it's interesting, being on a road trip and just kind of digesting just all the different conversations and all the different ways in which people think. And, I just think that people today have been so psychologically conditioned and manipulated into sort of thinking about themselves, about their culture in very, very skewed and victimized ways. And I'm talking across cultures. People are being, influenced to be demonized by a past that may be of their people, but not their present experience. And so when we talk about slavery, I think that it's a topic that I feel like is constantly being delivered out of context. And for some reason, people are intent on making slavery a Black people thing or a Black American thing. Like slavery never happened to any other race or culture or people in any given nation. And it's kind of weird to me too, because when you think about most nations in this world and throughout history, they were built on the backs of slaves. And who are those slaves? These were people who may have been criminals. These may have been people who were born in lower economic situations. And um, there's all kinds of reasons why people were slaves. Primarily, they were conquered by other nations and they became slaves. So you look at people across cultures, Africans are guilty of slavery or enslaving people that they conquered. Europeans are. Now, when you start talking about the Europeans, right? You know, even them, down to this whole notion of white supremacy. Who are these white people? Because when you think about it, Black and white are really constructs of the West. They are Western constructs, right? You're not gonna go to Iceland and this person is gonna be like the people are gonna be like we're white men, right? For the most part, you're not gonna go to some homogenous nation and they're gonna refer to themselves as white people, right? That is a construct mostly of Western cultures to separate and segregate their people by design, because a lot of them are very diverse in culture, right? And there has to be a way to segment people out. So they're like, okay, well, let's just do it by complexion, right? Everybody that's dark, they're going to be constituted as Black. Everybody who is this hue, um, you're going to be constituted as white. Whether you are a Christian, a Jew, or anything in between, you're going to be constituted as white. And obviously, Asian countries, they get a little bit more gray because they are their own culture as well. And they have their own history as well. And I think when you start, having these repetitive conversations about slavery, right, is the end game for Black Americans reparations and acknowledgement from America that they have done Black people wrong historically without any type of penance. If that is the argument, then it's like, that conversation is subjective. Um, and I think that you can look at it from the lens of there's some validity there, but then there's also some emotional exaggeration there. And that's just the bottom line. There's two ways to that argument. But at the end of the day, I think that America owes Black people the same way that they felt compelled to owe other people. So if other groups are getting reparations or they have gotten reparations because of some grievances filed against the United States, then yes, then Black Americans, if we are entitled, right? Sure. But, it's very subjective when you're saying, okay, you're asking for reparations for a grievance that you individually did not experience. And that's where these arguments get really gray. But then it's like, well, the Holocaust wasn't in the United States, and Jewish people still get tax breaks and some kind of reparations for that. So the conversation, it really boils down to money. It doesn't really boil down to me to anything other than money. And to me, when the money is paid out, what other grievances will there be to reconcile? And will this country be able to move on after these payments are sent out, right? Because really, when you think about it, if you give reparations to Black people, right, you're not going to be able to leverage them anymore, right? At least that conversation, unless they're coming back asking for more. And then that's where you're really going to have an uproar, right? So when you give Black people their reparations, right, you can't use that argument. It's like the abortion, right? They can leverage abortion once it got kicked back to the state, right? They're going to have to try to finesse the abortion argument some new way, right? Because now Roe v. Wade is overturned back to the states where it should have been, right? So, the end game needs to be clear in sight for Black Americans. Is our reparation just monetary, or are we demanding that we take control over our narrative, our image, which at the present moment and historically has not been owned by us? They have fabricated, they hijacked hip hop, and they turned it into what we see it is today, right? Everything that Blacks create, we don't have enough honor in it, a lot of us, to even maintain it. We are so money driven that we give it to somebody else. And that's why Black people are very leverageable, because we continuously build something, some of us, and then we are willing to give it to other people or let them take stake in what we build. And before you know it, we don't own it anymore, right? So, I find that Black Americans have been indoctrinated with slavery to believe certain things about them from one generation to the next. And I think that this argument, this conversation, and even it being taught in schools is really to keep Black people in a marginalized way of thinking. And we're never going to overcome if we keep on opening up wounds, picking sores, right, instead of empowering ourselves, standing up for ourselves. I love it when I see Black people come together, right, to fight for each other. I love it. Just like Jamie Foxx, right? Like Jennifer Aniston wasn't about to get away with being in that man's business. Black Twitter gave her the business. And I think I think slowly but surely Black people are signaling, stay the hell out of our business. Stay out of our business. Stop trying to own our people in every single aspect of their lives. And this is across sectors. Like, stop trying to own our people. Democrats are trying to own the minds of Black people. Republicans are trying to own the minds of Black people. And it's like, you know what? Black people need to own the minds of Black people. We need to get like the Asian people, the Jewish people, and we need to coalesce. And we need to say, you know what? If it's favorable for me to help a Black person or a Black business out, I'm going to prioritize doing that. Not saying that I don't want to help other people out. It's just that Black people, we don't build the Black community if we're not supporting the Black community. And I'm not one to say, oh, let's all pull our money together and just be our own little. No. But what I'm saying is that down to slavery, we have a history of betraying each other, not trusting each other, and really manipulating each other all the same. Like, we aren't down with the same struggle as some people are struggle junkies, right? And I'm just saying, if you're going to keep continuously running on this rhetoric, at least make it make sense and be a little bit more consistent. And if people feel like, oh, you don't talk like a Black woman, it's like, well, I'm kind of in the school of thought now where I am divorcing myself of constructs, Western constructs of who I am, how I should think, right? Because I see that I get attacked for just trying to be my natural self, right? You have all these struggle junkies and they're like, I just want to be my natural self and people should be what they want to be and blah, 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 as long as it don't hurt nobody. And yet you can't respect that. You cannot respect that. And I'm talking mainly to some of these quote unquote white supremacist structures like LinkedIn, like Microsoft LinkedIn. How the hell do you virtue signal to Black people that you're all about diversity, equity, inclusion, and fairness, and you are outright trying to stop successful minded Black people from succeeding? You are the obstacle. You are the obstacle that Black people talk about. And when I think about those obstacles, I think about LinkedIn. I think about how prejudiced they have at least proven to me to be, because they will sit there and allow all kinds of ridiculous rhetoric, right? But once they see an inspirational Black woman that not only can gain a rapid following of both Black and white people, right, of all genders, right, they want to shut it down. So when people start talking about, oh, more Black voices just need to stand up, it's like, we do. But when we do, these people have a history of suppressing us. They have a history of taking out Black leaders and Black voices because they need a narrative about Black people to be perpetuated. So, and when I say they, I talk about the government and the media. They, because they are like in definitely coalescing against all kinds of groups to stir the pot, accentuate racism and political inflammatory thought. Like, this is their thing. And it's like, I'm just like, I'm not even trying to be involved with that BS, but don't mess with my hustle. And I think that's where it gets really irritating and people start getting pissed when you start messing with their money, right? It's like, I don't care. Like, my whole thing is this. If you are a person that is invested in Black oppression, right? But then you claim that you are a friend to Black people and you're an ally to Black people, to me, you need to pick a struggle because you fake as hell. You fake as hell. If you are, I'm a friend of Black people, I want to see them succeed. But if we don't think the way that you want us to think, like a damn slave master, like some of you trying to be, because you have white privilege and supremacy, and I'm not just talking about the Christian kind, if you know what I mean, then you can hold Black people down and be petty. So you're the real white supremacist. I mean, and I'm saying that straight up. And honestly, a supremacist can be somebody of all colors. And people need to realize that. People of all colors actually own Black slaves in America. White Christians own them. White Jews own them. There was even a little segment, small segment, of wealthy Black slave owners. And if you want to get technical, Jewish people own just as many slaves as their white counterparts. Matter of fact, they had the Southern slave trade on lock. If you want to really keep talking about slavery, let's go and deep dive into this so that we all understand how everybody in this nation has screwed each other over indiscriminately. So let's keep on talking about slavery if that's just the thing to do and the thing to fund. But we need to start telling the truth about it. And when we start telling the truth about slavery and people start seeing the real face of slavery, down to the unreasonableness to believe that Black people throughout that entire duration were in chains and chattels. It's like, use a little bit more emotional intelligence than that. I mean, there were too many even down to the narrative that they wouldn't allow Black people to read. Southern slavery was horrible. It was horrible. They were greatly mistreated. I'm not going to let anybody convince me that slaves, I mean, I'm sure there were, but Southern slavery was horrible for Black people, right? But that's not to say that all of slavery in the United States was a horrible experience. It's not to say that every single slave master in the United States mistreated their slaves. In fact, there's a lot of historical documentation that would suggest that there were many slave owners who actually treated their slaves more like family. Their kids grew up with their kids. Generations of people. And it's believable because then you kind of go into how is it that right after slavery, there were so many Black inventors that rose up. Now you're talking about, hey, they deprived these people of education. They couldn't read. How the hell did that happen? Some slave master must have been allowing their slaves to be trained and be tradesmen and to learn different skills that will help them one day when they would become free. And these slave masters treated their slaves so well that many of them decided that when slavery was abolished, that they didn't want to leave the plantation. They literally did become indentured servants. Many of them became indentured servants, and in their indentured servitude, a lot of them ended up having land. Now, how did Black people lose their land, right? There's a lot of, you look up the history of Black land owners in the United States, there were a lot of them. There was actually more post-slavery and during Jim Crow than there are right now. So how did they lose their land? Well, of course, you have Torrance Acts, right? You have property taxes that came into play. And unfortunately, a lot of those slaves were on fixed incomes, right? So to me, property taxes are legal theft. To me, they are the only form of taxation on people that should never exist because it literally robs people of their sense of ownership. So it's like you work all your life, most of your life to buy your dream home, right? You even pay the damn thing off, right? But you're still not done paying on it because the government says, well, you have to pay us to be able to own your property. How ridiculous is that? That's like theft. That's legal theft. So property taxes came into play, and that is how a lot of Black slaves lost their property because they were on fixed incomes. So nobody was budgeting Uncle Sam asking them to pay to stay in their property. So yes, Black people's land wasn't stolen. It wasn't stolen per se, because the tax structure was legal. And a lot of them were not educated about those things. And it was those things that really created the dynamic for a lot of Black people post-slavery to lose the property that they had either inherited from their masters or they worked for as indentured servants after slavery was abolished. And these are facts. There's documentation of this stuff. Just go and you do your research outside of the white supremacist structure and you'll get some context of your own. Don't believe me. Just do your own damn research like I did. And use your common sense. Use your common sense, right? Madam C.J. Walker was a millionaire not even 5 years after slavery. Okay? Come on, y'all. Let's just make sense of history. Lattimore, Carver, these men were intelligent inventors who had access to intelligent slave owners that allowed them to learn, who actually fancy their curiosity to let them develop into the geniuses that we should know them to be, because they were geniuses. So that's just to say that it is unreasonable for people to have the mindset about slavery that they do. I know that, but I understand why they have it, because when you look at the cinema, mainstream media, these people are very insistent upon making slavery. I'm staying in this hotel. If I had something to drink here, I do. They are very insistent upon making slavery this just horrible, horrible scenario, when really it was a business model. Unfortunately, it was a business model that included humans and commodities. And because it included humans and commodities, the reality of slavery is that the United States, for the most part, purchased the blacks that they brought over here from the very black faces that enslaved them in the first damn place. Those people were already slaves when they were over here because they were captive from other African tribes. So this conversation about slavery, it irks me to an extent because of how the lessons in the history of slavery is delivered so out of context. It's meant to inflame Black people instead of putting a lot of things into perspective about us as a community, but also, the reality of what our people went through. And like over time as slavery progressed in America. So, and even down to like Jim Crow. I mean, again, if Black people want reparations for the continuous demonization and marginalization of our community, okay, that's fine, because it's fair. Because really, when you think about it, Black people really didn't have all of their equal rights into EEOC. And that was like the late 70s. That was like in the 70s, right? So Black people still had to fight the corporate structure to have fair access. So in that respect, it's like, yeah, I do believe that something is owed to Black people. What that amount is, I'm not sure. I really just believe that since it shouldn't really be because of slavery. It really shouldn't. None of us went through slavery. None of our parents did. None of their parents. And I don't even think any of their parents did. So it makes more sense for Black people to sue this nation for continuous discrimination, right? If that were going to be the lawsuit, because there's track records of this where the government has enabled certain things to happen that has directly disenfranchise Black people disproportionately. And that's just a matter of fact. And they should be accountable for that. So I think a tax break for African Americans is definitely appropriate, just like the Holocaust survivors. And I think that would do it. It would definitely require people to still have to have some form of income. So you can't be a bum in society. You still got to work. But you're going to get a wicked tax break, descendant of slave tax break, to lower your income, to keep money in your house. And they should honor the land. There's so much land in the United States. They should honor the land. I want the land. And the way I saw a video of Angus cows being shot from the air. I'm like, bitch, why are you shooting my reparations? Forget the mule. You got free range cows over there. Like, y'all got to make some of this stuff make sense to me, because it don't. It really don't. I'm looking at and I'm observing a whole bunch of fuckery. That's what it is. Excuse my language, Lord. I'm trying to work on a cursing. I think I've been doing good in these videos, but come on. It's just really dumb. Just dumb, da dumb, dumb, dumb. And then we got, and I want to like end on this because I didn't want this to be a super long video, but I got to talk about just the entertainment races for a second. Y'all see how they went after Jamie Foxx? And I think the tweet said something about, they killed this dude named Jesus. So what do you think they're going to do to you? Hashtag fake friends. Now, Jesus was definitely betrayed by a friend, which led to his death, right? And, the history of that is what it is because obviously, somebody paid Judas to betray Jesus, right? And somebody had enough influence and money to force the hand of Pontius Pilate, who actually didn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. Matter of fact, that man ended up killing himself. His wife, if you read the accounts, she didn't want him to have anything to do with him. She told him to wash his hands clean of it, and he was just pressured. He was weak on that front. He wanted to keep, there was a lot of religious leaders at that time that had a lot of power, money, and influence, and they wanted it done. So, yes, I don't understand the backlash of why certain people want to continue to internalize everything to themselves. To me, I read it as guilty conscience. It's like a guilty conscience. It's like, I don't want you to criticize me because I have a guilty conscience that you have acknowledged some patterns of my behavior that I don't want you to see. And it's like, people need to understand that the patterns of things do not lie. And and this is kind of a warning for people. It's like, forget people trying to be threats to you. Sometimes you got to stop internalizing everything and really make sense of what people are saying. Like, cause sometimes it's not even trying to be threatening to you. It's really calling out the fact that you're threatening to yourself. You are threatening to yourself. But Jennifer Aniston learned. She learned. But I want to talk about the fact that Cardi B had the nerve to post on Instagram and Twitter, which are now deleted. But I blogged about it earlier that, I'm about to get off on these charges. My lawyer is Jewish. She's going to chew these charges up, right? And certain people in the Jewish community got really upset. Some of them didn't. They was like, she's giving us props. She's giving us props, guys. And then some people was like, this is an anti-Semitic trope. She's saying that, lawyers and Jewish people are always attacked and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, whoa. Where's all the feelings from? Like, now I kind of laughed at the post because I'm like, she mentioned them. So therefore she's about to delete this and have some heat. And she did, right? But it's kind of odd to me that people are that sensitive that, you say my lawyer is this X and they have a track record of getting people off. And then all of a sudden you're labeled and people are all up in their feelings. But that's just to say, there was no news articles. There was no mainstream media magazines talking about Cardi B and what she said and did. And she literally posted a picture of them. But they did that to Jamie Foxx. And we keep saying this, they keep going after our Black brothers. And we see what happens when y'all keep going after our Black brothers, because they did it with Kanye. They did it with Kyrie. And you see how the Black community responded. Now Jennifer Aniston. And you see how the Black community responded. And it's just like that little boat trip. You see how Black people responded. Black people, I am proud of us because we are coming together. We are coming together. And we got to keep this momentum, because that is the only way that we are going to really resolve some of the internal things that are going on in our community. And if we can resolve the internal things, we can all handle the external. We can all handle the external, but we have to stop allowing these external factors to get into our heads, get into our emotions, try to, shut us down. I mean, we can't allow that. So I'm going to pray for everybody. I think people should be peaceful. Like, at the end of the day, God's people are of all colors. God's true people are of all colors, and they're from all nations. And because of that, there is no room in a true Christian's heart or life for hate for another person because of some ideological belief or a skin tone. So that's my take. I just wanted the slavery arguments are constantly just getting on my nerve. I think a lot of Black people are all up in their feelings because Ron DeSantis is, doing stupid shit. I really think that white structures need to back off of Black tribal lessons. Just back off of them. And Black people, it should just be American history taught. And do not center on slavery. Let that happen in the home of Black people. You can talk about slavery, but it should be in a progressive lens. This is how we built our country. And this 16, whatever, we started, the United States got into the slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was a business model. That is the way that slavery historically has been the way that many nations have built their country. Their nations is on the backs of slaves. Slaves brought to America were already enslaved by the neighboring tribes that conquered them in Africa. And it's very notable that Africans are tribal people. They don't have a construct of you're Black like me. They only know you're Hutu, you're Tutsi, you're from this nation, you're from that nation, you're from this tribe, that tribe. They're tribal people. Africans are tribal people. Okay? So the United States purchased some conquered Africans from some Africans. And at some point, Africa was invaded and colonized. But this was well after they were trading in the slave trade. Willfully. Okay? So, Blacks came to America. Unfortunately, they were brought here on the Amistad and various different Mayflowers, different ships, slave ships. Part of the business model, unfortunately, again, it was the business of trading commodities and people. So these people got there. And obviously these people, they were scared. Many of them decided to kill themselves before they even got here, jumping off the boat, getting free, allowing the people to kill them before they could enslave them here. A lot of them did that. Just because, and to Kanye's point, slavery is a choice. You either live as a slave or die free. And those people jumped in that water. Obviously, some of them probably died, but they died free men. And it's a very sad reality, but that probably was the case in many instances, which is why, Kanye's statement was not all the way wrong, because in many situations, slavery was a choice, even down to there were indentured African slaves. Because again, way before Africa was invaded, they were trusted trading partners. So some people wanted to come to America to be in the free world and learn new and learn new skills, right? That was the choice factor for some of these people in Africa, even down to some of the women before they were invaded. And we need to talk about slavery from the lens of when everything was willful and business friendly, and then when business turned south. And that's really the best way to look at slavery in this nation is business was good and friendly, and then it wasn't. And then that point where it wasn't, how many slaves were actually brought over to America? Not that many. Only 10%, I would say, were actually brought to America. That means that there are brothers and sisters in like other countries, that are definitely, probably there's more descendants of slaves in other countries than America. But that's my little slavery perspective. Yeah. I'm about to go and relax myself, get myself ready to do my last meeting and get on the road. But we got to do better with these conversations. Oh, and even down to Jim Crow. There were slavery was a business model that was hard for a lot of people for prejudice reasons, but also for economic reasons to let go. And that's very realistic. When you go from having absolute free labor that you can control to not having labor that you can't control, and now you got to pay them, cut into your bottom line. A lot of people didn't want slavery to end. Even with the founders, some of the founders not really wanting that to be a lasting business model. And there's even documentation of some of the founders believing that it was an eyesore for our country. It was still a hard business model once it was in motion to stop. And I think that's where, this country really had to figure out how to reconcile itself. And that's why we did have the Civil War, right? But I think that if we looked at slavery for the realistic aspects, we'll see that over time, a lot of those Africans got accustomed to their life. You're talking about when you're born a slave, like the first generation of slaves, right? They were absolutely probably the most damaged and traumatized, right? But every generation, things got better and better. And even down to our day, we don't live like they do in the 50s and 60s and even down to the 70s. A lot of us modern Black Americans have the same rights and freedoms as anybody else. We are just as enslaved or not enslaved as everybody else. Some of us are still in mental slavery, and we need to break ourselves free of that. Many of us are. But right now, I think that, even down to like LinkedIn, I do believe that there's a racial element to how they're attacking me, because I'm a Black woman and I don't really fit the narratives that they want to perpetuate about Black people. However, I think that this is across the board. Sites and companies like LinkedIn, they are on that social justice warrior. We want to socially engineer society, and this is how we need this person to think, this person to think, and this person to think, and we're going to perpetuate that type of rhetoric on our site, and anything contrary to that will be banned. And that's exactly what they're doing. So they're banning the people who are pragmatic. They're banning the people who actually are solutions-based. And they're keeping all the people that are inflammatory fire starters. So that's the world we live in, y'all. Anyways, have a good day. I will talk to you when I get back to Michigan. Bye.